أحد يقرأ بالعربية ثم يقرأ بالإنجليزية. إذا ما أحد يعرف يقرأ عربي، اقرأ أنت يا مصطفى. اقرأ، نعم. أحد يقرأ باللغة الإنجليزية. إلى درجة معينة. طيب، درس اليوم نتكلم فيه عن السلم. وعندنا طبعا السلم هو بيع شيء موصوف في الذمة، لكنه بلفظ السلام أو السلف. والنبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول: من أسلف في شيء فليسلف في كيل معلوم ووزن معلوم إلى أجل معلوم. طبعا السلف أو السلم صورته يكون تصويره واضح. مثلا أنا أقول مثلا لزيد: يا زيد، أسلمت إليك هذه 100,000 على أن تأتي لي بسيارة كامري وصفها كذا وكذا وكذا، مثلا تسلمها لي في أول شهر رجب، مثلا في مكة المكرمة، مثلا. هذه صورة السلم.
So, what does this trade look like? An example of this would be that Said gives an example. He says some Zaid goes to someone and he says that I give you this 100,000 rands in exchange for a vehicle. The vehicle is of this type, this description, this etc. features, and that you provide this for me at this particular place and time.
طبعا وسيأتي معنا ذكر أوصاف المسلم فيه هو الشيء مثلا السيارة لابد يسمي جميع الأوصاف كما سيأتي معنا.
No. And then specifically with regards to the Muslim fee. The Muslim fee is the merchandise that's bought via this description. So it says we're going to get into the details of that very soon.
طيب يقول عندنا في المتن هنا ويصح السلام حالا ويصح السلام مؤجلا. عندنا السلام إما أنا أقول مثلا أسلمت إليك هذا المال على أن تأتي لي بسيارة وتصبح مثلا كتاب مثلا كتاب صحيح البخاري طبعا مثلا دار الضياء مثلا أو دار المنهاج مثلا تسلمه لي في حالا الآن مثلا بهذا المال هذه تصويرها حالا.
Now, so this trade is permissible. It's permissible for you to go through this process and request that the item described, the merchandise, is provided immediately. Alright, so Said gives an example. Somebody goes up to someone and he says, I give you this money, this amount of money, for, Said gives the example of Sahih al-Bukhari, a book, or any book for that matter. He describes, I want this type, I want this book, this print, this printing house, etc., etc. Provided that you give it to me now. And so it says this, it's an advance sale in that, as Said will explain now, the item is not present, but it will be provided for you immediately.
فعندنا على مذهب الشافعية هذا يصح لأنه بخلاف المذاهب الثلاثة. المذاهب الثلاثة لا يصح السلام حالا بل لابد أن يكون مؤجلا. أما عند الشافعية يصح السلام أن يكون حالا ويصح أن يكون أيضا مؤجلا.
No. So it says, what we're pointing out here is that you have an idea of the sale already. But the sale is permissible whether you request the merchandise immediately, or whether you request a specific time, a delayed time, but a known time for the delivery of that merchandise. So it says, within the Shafi'i madhab, a trade of this nature is valid, meaning that it's an advance sale. You're buying something in advance, but you're requesting it immediately. Whereas the other madhahib do not permit it in that way. They're only permitted in mu'ajjalan. And mu'ajjalan meaning at a delayed time. So the entire example we just gave now, I'm purchasing this in advance with this money, etc., that you give it to me at such a date. So that's permissible according to all the madhahib, including the Shafi'i madhab. What Sayyid is pointing out here is that it's also permissible, valid within the Shafi'i madhab to request that immediately, not just at a delayed time.
نعم. كذلك عندنا فإذا قلنا إذا كان حالا فلا بد أن يأتي مثلا كما قلنا في الكتاب البخاري لا بد أن يأتي به حالا بسرعة.
No. So in that case, if that stipulation is made that it must be given immediately, then the sale would be valid and he has to provide it immediately.
للمسلم الذي أعطاه المال هذا أن يلزمه أن يأتي بهذه السرعة.
العفو سيد ممكن تعيد؟
نقول المسلم الذي أعطاه المال ما دام قال له حالا لا بد المسلم يأتي بالكتاب حالا.
No, as long as the buyer stipulates that he wants this provided immediately, then it has to be given immediately.
إذا لم يأتي حالا فالمسلم مخير بين أن ينتظر أو يفسخ العقد.
And so what happens if the seller doesn't provide it immediately? Right? Then so it says that the buyer then has the choice. He could either wait or he could cancel the contract.
طيب عندنا نقول كذلك عندنا لو يوجد الحلول كيف؟ اصلا هو لم يذكر التأجيل، على اساس لك هذا المال على ان تأتي مثلا الكتاب كذا وصفه كذا ولم يذكر له مؤجل لشهر رجب مثلا او شهر كذا، سكت ايضا ان عدد السلف حالا كذا.
No. What happens if he doesn't stipulate a time? Not immediately, nor at a delayed specific time. He mentions everything. The entire contract takes place without the mention of time of delivery, time of him providing it. So it says if he was silent to the time of delivery, then automatically the contract moves to the fact that the merchandise has to be provided immediately. If he doesn't mention anything, then it has to be provided immediately.
كذلك عندنا يصح السلم مؤجل، والاصل ان السلم انه مؤجل. يقول له اسلمت اليك هذا المال على ان تاتي مثلا الكتاب وصفه كذا وكذا في شهر مؤجل في شهر مثلا رجب او في شهر مثلا شعبان وهكذا.
And then obviously it's also permissible for the contract to be, or the delivery time to be at a delayed time, a specific delayed time. I said at the beginning of this month or the beginning of that month. And so it says this is the asl in this contract, in that you are purchasing something in advance, meaning the thing is not there, you're giving the money up front with a description. So obviously this is permissible at a specific time, at the beginning of next month or the following month.
فالمسلم فيه يصح أن يكون حالك ويصح أن يكون مؤجل.
So the merchandise, we're repeating, the merchandise can be requested to be delivered immediately and can be at a delayed time.
أما رأس المال فلا يصح فيه تأجيل. لا بد أن يسلم رأس المال بمصر.
As for the money that you are paying, that cannot be delayed from the contract. That money must be given up front in order for the contract to be valid.
الأفضل تعيد الشرح بقطع الأفضل تعيد الشرح برأس المال لأن قطع الصوت.
So what we so we said that the merchandise. Said asked me to repeat the answer. I think there are students that said as well. So the merchandise can be delayed or can be given immediately. However, the money that's paid, the money in exchange for the merchandise, must be given up front in the contract. Cannot be delayed from the contract.
طيب قلنا طيب عندنا لو أقبضه بعض رأس المال أعطاها نصفها ربعها ولم يعطي جميع المال فليكن بذلك.
What happens if the buyer gives the money up front but he doesn't give the entire amount? He gives some of it up front, but say ask what's the ruling with regards to that?
مثلا أعطاه مثلا نقول مثلا فلوس إليك أو مثلا 100,000 مثلا على مثلا أن تأتي مثلا تشتري مثلا بكمية مثلا رز من وصف كذا مثلا نقول 1000 كيلو مثلا نقول ماذا؟ نقول البيع صحيح. لكن إذا أقبضنا بعض رأس المال أعطانا 50,000 ولم يعطي 100,000 فنقول صح بقسطه 50 وقال 1000 كيلو جرام. فإذا أعطاه 50,000 مثلا نقول إذا 500 كيلو جرام صح و500 جرام لا يصح لأن لم يكن رأس المال.
So it says, what happens if he gives a part of the money? He doesn't give the entire amount. So Said gives an example. He says, let's say the person says, I give you this 100,000 rands. for you to provide me with rice. It's a lot of rice. The Said gives the example like 1,000 kilos of rice, right, of this type, and description is there, everything is there. However, up front, he mentioned the 100,000 rands in exchange for that goods, but he gives 50,000 rands, right, which is half of the amount that is mentioned. So it says that the contract would be valid in the half that he has given, the half of the money is given, and invalid in the half, not invalid, the half that's not given, that would not be accounted for, that would not be included. It will only be valid in the half that is given up front. And what that means is the seller then provides him with 500 kilos instead of 1,000.
نعم. طيب لكن عند وهذا تفسير
and this ruling that we just mentioned now is according to the Shafi'i madhab, the Maliki madhab, and the Hanafi madhab.
أما عند المالكية فيجوز تأخير تسليم رأس المال إلى 3 أيام.
According to the Shafi'i madhab, Hanafi madhab, Hanbali madhab. As for the Maliki madhab, you are permitted to delay the giving of the paying of the price, the paying of the money. You are able to delay it from the contract itself.
نعم. الآن سيتكلم ماذا عن شروط السلم.
So now we're going to discuss the conditions for the validity of this buying in advance.
قال عندنا ماذا الآن طبعا شروط السلم عندنا الأول أن يكون مضبوطا بالسلم، يعني حيث يختلف شيء عن الجبل، الكلام يكون مضبوط بالسلم بحيث ينتهي صفته حالا عن هذا المستلم فيه.
So for the validity of this contract, the merchandise must be something that can be described in detail, such that, it says, ينتفي عنه صفة الجهالة, that there's no unknown aspect of this thing. You are able to describe this thing with very specific characteristics.
ولا بد يكون هذه الصفات تكون مضبوطة معينة.
And the descriptions must be very specific.
وسيأتي معنا الفصل اللي بعده عندنا مثلا كيف يكون ذكر هذا الوصف.
And exactly how this should be described, so it says, will come in the later chapter following this.
طيب أما ما لا يمكن ضبطه بالوصف فلا يصح السلم.
As for an item or merchandise that cannot be described with specific characteristics, then it would not be permissible to do a salam trade, buying in advance for this item.
مثلا الجوهرة ما يمكن ضبطه بالسلم.
For example, a jawhara would be something like a diamond or a pearl.
مثل الماس.
Like a diamond. So it says it's very difficult to actually describe this with very specific characteristics.
كذلك الجلد في جلد رقيق، في جلد أسمك منه، في جلد أسمك وأسمك. إذا ما يمكن ضبطه بالصفة غالبا فلا يصح السلم.
Also, it gives the example of certain skin, the hides of certain animals. It's very difficult to give a very precise description or characteristics that's needed to specify them. So doing a salam trade in these items would not be valid.
نعم. لكن قال إذا كان الآن الجلود مضبوطة بالصفة، قلنا الآن الجلود الباع والسوق مضبوطة بالصفة، حجم كل ساعة كم حجم مثلا. إذا أمكن ضبطه بالصفة يصح. العلة في عدم صحة السلم الجلود هو عدم الضبط. أما إذا أمكن الضبط فنقول يصح السلم.
Now, also to keep in mind, the example that was given of a hide or skin tanned skin of an animal, yesterday was very difficult to actually give a very precise, to provide you precisely with what you need. But now Said is saying that if we were to say that today's shops and the mechanisms that's used to produce certain products can actually give a very specific description of characteristics in terms of length, in terms of type, in terms of, if that's possible, then the salam trade would be valid.
ايوه عندنا كذلك عندنا لم يختلط بغيره.
No. The next condition is that the merchandise that's bought in advance is not something that is mixed with other things.
عندنا المخلوطات.
So things that are mixed with other things, they are of two categories.
عندنا المخلوط في عندنا مخلوط بعض شيء بعض آخر ويكون كله مبسوط الأجزاء.
So you'll find something, and just bear with me for the description. Said will give examples in a minute, but you'll find something that's mixed with other things. However, both ingredients, both things that are mixed, are actually sought after, right? The examples will come.
نعم مثل عندنا لو خلط مثلا مسك وعنبر، لو خلط مسك وعنبر سيكون مختلط وبعض ببعض والمسك والعنبر كله مبسوط الأجزاء.
So it gives an example of mixing musk and amber. Now, to mix the two, both of those things are actually sought after, meaning you would purchase them individually, right? To mix them, the mixing of it is not the issue. We're talking about in a salam trade, right? Once you mix it, you can no longer perform a salam trade in that item.
كذلك عندنا مثلا الهريسة مركبة من قمح ولحم وماء.
And then I said gives another example of harisa. Harisa is a type of dish. I don't know if we're familiar with it, but it's made up of meat and pastry and sweet things and whatever. It's one dish, but it's made up of many things. So because all of these things are sought after and they are mixed, the salam trade in that won't be valid because you can't give a very specific description of the characteristics of each one of them. They're all mixed.
نعم فإذا كان كل واحد من المخلطات مختلفة فإن كان منضبط فيصح وإن كان غير منضبط فلا يصح ذلك.
So if we are talking about a merchandise, a product that you are mixing things, something that's mixed, but and they are both sought after, but both of them can be sufficiently described and specified, so in that case it would be valid. But as for the impossibility of doing so, that you cannot, after mixing it, specify that this is made up of, specify them and give specific characteristics for these things, then it would not be valid.
عندنا مثلا لو قلنا مسك وعنبر مخلوط بعض ببعض وعرفنا ضبط كل من المسك وضبط كل من العنبر هنا يصح هنا مضبوط الأجزاء عمل مقصودة وهي مضبوطة.
So if we're saying that in the example of the musk and the amber that's mixed, we can actually guarantee that it's an X amount of this and an X amount of that, even though both of them are sought after, the fact that we can give this specific description in them, that would then mean that the sale would be valid.
أو مثلا عندنا الثياب المصنوعة من صوف وقطن ونسبة الصوف ونسبة القطن أيضا مضبوطة.
Or clothing that's made up of wool and cotton, and the amount of cotton is known and specified and the amount of wool is known and specified, in that case also it would be valid.
ما معنى مضبوط الأجزاء؟ أي أن كل من المتعاقدين يعرف وزن كل مثلا من الخليج بعضهم، يعرف مثلا ثوب مصنوع مثلا من بطون وصوص، المتعاقدين المسلم إليه يعرف وزن البطون ويعرف وزن الفصول، هذا معناه مضبوط الأجزاء.
No. So what does this mean, مضبوط الأجزاء? That both buyer and seller is aware of exactly how much of this is in there and how much of that, how much is made up of wool, how much is made up of cotton. For example, both buyer and seller is aware of the amounts, specified the amounts are found. That is what we mean by مضبوط الأجزاء.
أما إذا كان مختلط وهي غير مخصوص الأجزاء، مثلا أنا كالجبن مخلوطة بالملح مثلا، فالملح والملح غير مخصوص الأجزاء، فيصح السلام في الجبن ولا يلزم ذكر الملح والملح.
As for if the other items that's mixed with the merchandise is actually not something that is sought after for it.
عفوا نقول ماذا عندنا الجبن هو الأصل، هو أصل المستخرج إلى اللبن، لكنه مخلوط بالملح والملح، هو مخلوط، لكن هذا المخلوط به غير مخصوص الأجزاء، فيصح السلام في الجبن مع كونه مخلوطة إلى غير مخصوص الأجزاء.
Now, as for the second category, meaning the merchandise that's bought or ordered, is mixed with other things. However, those other things are not actually sought after for them in and of itself. In other words, they're just extra things to make up what you want. And so it gives the example of cheese. So the cheese comes from the milk. The cheese itself is what you want, but the transformation from the milk to the cheese, they've included other things like salt or renum, etc., to make up the cheese. These things are not really what's sought after, right? So, despite the fact that it's mixed with something else, the trade would be valid. Right? Despite the fact that it's mixed, because the things that it's mixed with is not sought after from the outset. It's not something you wanted from the outset, right? It's things that was added to make up the component of what you want. And the thing that you want, which is the cheese, can be sufficiently described and specified in terms of amount and weight and everything. So it would be valid.
فلو جئنا مثلا وزن الملح مثلا مع الجبن فلا إشكال فيه لأنه
So in this case it would be valid because those things that are mixed with it, despite the fact that it's mixed, are not sought after, and the thing that you want that's sought after, like the cheese, can be sufficiently described.
عندنا كذلك من الشروط صحة السلم عندنا لا تدخل النار لحال يدخل النار لتحويل شيء إلى شيء آخر.
And then the next condition is that the merchandise that you're purchasing, part of the process is that it does not enter heat or fire for its transformation.
فإن دخلته النار مثلا لطبخ أو قلي أو خبز فلا يصح السلام.
So if something has to go into the fire in order to cook it or to bake it, etc., then the salam trade would not be valid in that. Why? Because you would not be able to accurately produce precisely what the description or characteristics are every time.
لأن تأثير النار عليه لا يقدر.
Now, because the effect of the fire that it's going to have on the item, on the merchandise, on the bread or whatever it is that you are making, you can't guarantee that it's going to give you the outcome that you've described.
أما إذا كان دخلت النار فيه وهو منضبط مثلا دخلت النار على الشمع لأن يميز العسل من الشمع هذا يصح السلام بالعسل مع دخول النار.
However, those things that must enter, those things that part of the process is to have it heated in order to, say, gives the example of honey, to remove certain other things, wax or other things from, in order to get to the honey. This is the normal process. And salam is valid in those things.
كذلك عندنا دخول النار في السمن لأجل تمييزه من اللبن. أيضا يصح لأن هناك مصيبة تمييز من اللبن.
نعم ممكن تعيد سيد؟
عندنا أولا دخول النار على العسل لأن التمييز هنا يصح ولا إشكال النار دخلت لكن بس التمييز فلا إشكال مثل دخول النار في السمن فقط لكن التمييز من اللبن فيصح ولا إشكال.
So what do you have to understand here? Just so that I just make sure everyone's understanding that when you're buying something in advance, you want to ensure that a proper description can be given. And what we're looking at here is that the merchandise is actually acceptant of a precise description and specification of its qualities. So why Sayyid is speaking about those things that are entering fire not being valid is because you won't be able to give the exact description or produce the exact characteristics that's described by the buyer. Said it's given an exception to the honey because that is part of the process to remove and to get it into the way that you need it to utilize it, to buy it. That is part of the process for it to be heated in order to remove what's not wanted from what's wanted.
طيب جميل. لو افترضنا الآن الحرارات هذه أن الأجهزة تصنع أشياء أشبه بالنار مثلا تدخل في حرارات معينة مضبوطة بمقدار معين بقياس معين، فإن صح ذلك يصح ذلك مع أنه شبيه بالنار لكنه هنا صار مضبوطا. العلة في عدم صحة دخول النار في شيء لأنه لا ينضبط دخول النار. لكن لو كنا في أجل
Now, so if someone were to argue and say that, well, the machinery and that we have today can actually produce, putting something into an oven can actually produce the very specific heat temperatures with and you can almost guarantee that the item will come out exactly how you wanted and described it the first time and the 10th time. So it says if it can produce successfully the specific descriptions and characteristics that was ordered, and we can guarantee that, in that case, then the salam trade would be valid in relation to that. Like the industrial machinery and stuff, yes. The bakeries and stuff.
نعم. عندنا كذلك عندنا من الشروط عندنا أن لا يكون المسلم فيه معين.
And then the next condition, and then the next condition is that the Muslim fee, the merchandise that's ordered, is not a specific particle, so something specific that now. Said we'll expound now.
مثلا ما يسألون أسلمت إليك هذا المال مثلا على هذه السيارة أو على هذا الجوال أو على هذا الكتاب، لا يصح لأننا السلام في مسألة معين.
So to do an advanced trade in something that's present would not be valid, right? You can something specific and present would not be valid. So it gives the example of I give you this money to buy a salam trade to buy this car, this specific car, or to buy this specific phone. So it's a salam trade, an advanced trade for a very specific item would not be valid.
نعم. بل لابد عندنا يكون المسلم فيه في الذمة ولا يصح معين أبدا.
Why? Because the nature of this contract is that the item that you are purchasing is described to the seller, and he takes this very specific description and he sources something that fits that description, right? The contract is not taking place on a specific item. You can just go back to a normal contract that we did in the very beginning to purchase a specific item. But in an advance sale, the seller walks away with this financial obligation or liability to source source the description, the something that fits the description that you've given. Now.
إذا عندنا من الشروط أن لا يكون المسلم به من معين من معين. كيف يعني؟ أسلمت لك هذا المال على مثلا 5 كيلو جرام من هذا الرز، نقول لا يصح.
So likewise, if it's not permissible for a specific item, it's not permissible for part of the specific item. So, Said gives the example of, I give you this money for this heap of rice that's here. There's a heap of rice that's made up of like 10 kilograms, and I say I give you one for a kilo of this rice. It's kind of the same example in that, but except that it's not the entire thing, it's part of the thing. But we already understand that when something is specific, it's not going to be valid in an advanced sale.
عندنا كذلك أن لا يكون المسلم فيه من موضع معين وهذا الشيء هذا الموضع قليل.
And then also, and I think this is the last condition, that the merchandise that's ordered and described is not something that where it's ordered, it's actually uncommon or scarce. There's this general unavailability of this thing.
مثلا قلت له أسلمت لك هذا المال على أن تأتي مثلا بتمر من منطقة مثلا قلت فاصلة مثلا تقول وهذا التمر مثلا فاصلة قليل جدا ما يصح السلام.
No. So, if you don't understand the example, we're speaking about scarcity or unavailability of this thing, making it almost impossible for the person to source it. But the example that Sayyid gives is that I come to you, I say I'll give you this money up front for a very specific type of date from Worcester, with very specific qualities, and in Worcester this thing is almost hardly found, right? So Sayyid said this would not be valid.
فلا بد يكون الشيء الذي أنا أطلبه من ذلك الموضوع أن يكون في ذلك الموضوع كثير ليس سواء كان بدة كبيرة أو بدة صغيرة لا فرق بينهم.
Now, so it must be the thing that I'm ordering, the merchandise that I'm describing and ordering. From the place I'm ordering, it must be common or easy to source the product in that place. The minute the thing there's a scarcity of that thing in that place, and I'm ordering from that place, and there's this probability that the person won't be able to source it, then it will not be valid.
والله أعلم.
والله أعلم.
درس القادم إن شاء الله نتكلم في التضرع.
No. Alhamdulillah. That is an outline of the chapter. So it says the next class, inshallah, we'll go into the details of the validity of this trade as is mentioned in the text.
أيضا سنتكلم عن الفرق بين السلم وبين البيع الموصول بالذمة.
And also next week, very important, we're going to highlight the differences between a salam trade, which we just discussed now, and a trade that of something that is described to the seller. So there are two types. You have the bay' mawsuf fi dhimma, which is something that's described to the seller, and you have the salam, which is also something that's bought in advance. So it's going to highlight the differences between the two, because they could very much resemble each other, but so it's going to highlight the differences between them.
من عنده سؤال يتفضل.
Questions?
On this last. This last condition, or the last two conditions, not a specific item nor from something specific. Can you please elaborate on that, please? The last two conditions, it is not a specific item, nor from something specific.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تسمعوني سيدي؟
نعم أسمعك جيدا.
تسمعوني سيدي؟
نعم.
يسمعوني؟ طيب. هل يمكن أن تشرح يعني أن تعيد الشرح إلى المسألة من لا يكون معينا ولا من معين؟ سمعتموني سيدي؟
أشرح الكل أو
بس الشرط الأخير بالنسبة يعني نعم معين، يعني لماذا كان باطلا في المعين ومن معين؟ سيدي يعني الكاميرا مغلق سيدي. لا نسمعكم سيدي، يعني الصوت يتقطع.
كم رسوم؟ Can we leave the question for next week? رفيق.
هو أخرجني من نفسي. هو أخرجني.
Salam trade is that it's an advanced sale, so you can't. You probably thinking that you can't purchase the item. You can purchase the item in a normal sale.
بسم الله بسم الله. طيب عندنا معين أقول لك أسلمت إليك 1000 ريال على هذا الرجل.
No, that is two separate things. There's two separate things. From something specific, Said gives the example of the heap of rice, 10 kgs heap of rice, and I'm going to purchase 2 kgs of that 5 kgs. But I'm saying this, I want 2 kgs of this.
نسمعكم سيدي.
That's why when I mentioned in the commentary that it's the same like the previous one, in that it's a specific thing, but it's an advanced contract. You with me?
طيب أما من معين أقول له أسلمت إليك هذا المال على 5 كيلو من هذا الرز. هذا من معين.
No, so I want 5 kgs of this rice. By saying this rice, this is a specific thing. While the salam trade is supposed to be something in advance and described.
هل وضحت الفرق بين معين ومن معين؟
نعم سيد.
طيب أنا سؤال آخر.
Any other questions? No.
So advance payment. So if you pay ordering food for someone and you pay it up front, is that valid or not?
يعني يعني تطلب من الشخص يعني أن تصنع لك يعني برياني مثلا، يعني طعام مطبوخ، هل يصح هذا سيدي؟ تسمعوني سيدي؟
نعم، هذا المسألة عندنا هذا يكاد يكون ليس سلم، لأن هذا عبارة عن تصنيع. فإما يكون استثناء مثلا، أو سيكون مثلا طعاما معينا، وليس هذا من باب السلم.
So since it's possible to look at this purchase as not a salam trade, but something, what does it say?
It's just now where you ask different type of contract.
No, it's a different type of contract. In fact, it's actually going to come to be mentioned later. But the point it's getting across here is that we won't consider this necessarily a salam trade, in that you're purchasing this in advance and this thing must be cooked, etc., which leaves out certain of the conditions for the validity of a salam trade. But it's a different contract altogether, which we will come to.
Because you manufactured it.
Yeah, it's been manufactured. Any other questions?
نعم. ما عنده سؤال آخر؟
And if you selling like an item on company, if someone pays you, then are you in Casanay?
A second-hand item. A second-hand item.
Item.
Specific item.
Like, if it's specific, but then it doesn't fall under.
So,
Source,
yeah.
source thing.
do you want me to ask a question? Or? طيب. يعني سؤال بالنسبة إلى عفوا يعني الأشياء مستعملة، يعني هناك موقع يعني أنت تبيع يعني الأشياء مستعملة يسمى قمتري عندنا، هل هذا من باب السلم أم من باب أشياء معينة، يعني البيع عين المغائبة، أعيان مستعملة سيدي؟
أنا المعين أنا أقول له أسلمت لك هذا المال على هذا الشيء، هذا المعين. أما أسلمت لك مثلا هذا المال على مثلا لابتوب مستعمل مدة كذا، أو مثلا أبل موديل كذا وسلم كذا. أما إذا كنا أسلمت لك هذا المال على هذا اللابتوب مستعمل مثلا، هنا لا يصح. نعم، لا أقول له بعتك هذا اللابتوب خلاص، من دون أقول له أسلمت على هذا اللابتوب، بعتك هذا اللابتوب. لكن إذا كان أنا سأصفها له وصفا، هنا نقول ليس بيع معين، قد يكون بيع نصف الذمة وقد يكون سلم سيد سكان الفرق بينهم إن شاء الله.
So Said is saying that what is saying?
It's basically separating the difference between the no, specifically that it all depends about how you word it, man.
No.
So you word it as a specific used item,
No.
different versus a used item.
No.
Let's describe.
No, so yeah, that's exactly what Said was. When Said was looking at the wording that is utilized, in other words, the thing that you are advertising on a website like Gumtree, for example, you're trying to see, does what we learned today, does it fall under a salam contract, and does what we learned today, would the purchase on Gumtree conform to the conditions that we mentioned? Now, so Said said, it comes down to the way you're going to word it, right? The way you would word, if you're going to utilize if you're going to purchase something in advance, but you're going to utilize very specific wording, I purchased this car from you, right? Then it's going to be problematic, right? But if you're going to say a car, right, with certain descriptions, then it will be valid. But Said says he's going to point out the difference between, in the following dars, the difference between the salam and the bay mawsuf al-dhimma. No.
Is it like when you ask somebody to source something for you?
Mm.
You know, it's not something specific. He must get something for you.
No.
So when he looks for it, he knows the thing that you need.
No,
No.
precisely.
So sourcing.
No,
It's
precisely.
not specifically buying the necessary.
Correct.
But even in that context, you could word it in a way that it appears as if you're sourcing it,
No.
Yeah.
even though it's something that's in the garage.
No.
Yes, they go.
No. Any other questions?
مثل عندنا مثلا لو قلنا انا سيارتي في الجراج، قلت لواحد اسمع في سياره حقي في هذا الجراج، مثلا الجراج مغلق، قلت له سيارتي داخل ووصفها كذا وكذا 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 وكذا، بعت ولك او اسلمت لك هذا المال على سياره داخل الجراج، يقول لا يصح. لماذا؟ لانه هذا صار السياره ما دام الشيء معين لابد ان يرى. اما اذا كان الموصوف اسلمت لك هذا المال على سياره وصفها كذا وكذا وكذا وكذا، يقول هنا يصح، بعدين اعطيه اما هذا السياره او اي سياره اخرى.
So listen to this example. It's precisely what Dr. was just saying now. So it gives the example of you have a car in the garage, right? You're selling the car in the garage. The garage is closed. You're telling someone outside, I'm selling you this car in my garage, and the car in the garage is of this model, etc. You describe the entire car to him. He doesn't see the car though, so it says this would not be valid. Why? You're selling a specific item. You're selling a specific item, but it's not seen. Basically, what needs to happen is you need to open up, have him see the car, and then you can sell that specific item. However, if you were to word it, the garage is closed, the car's inside, he didn't see the car. You're not speaking about this specific car. You're wording it to him in a description that this car in the garage conforms to, but any other car of that nature would also conform to. You give it to him in that description, not keeping the specific one in mind, and he accepts the description, and then you open up the garage and give it to him, it's fine. Right? Just depending on how you word the contract. No.
في سؤال من النساء؟
كان في الجروب يعني سؤال، هل يمكن أن تجيب للمسألة يعني تحويل المال من السؤال الذي ناقشناه يعني في الدرس الماضي؟ هل عندكم جواب لهذا السؤال من حيث تحويل المال من مبلغ؟
نعم عندنا الأصل عندنا لا إنما هنا في مسألة
ما سمعت كلام.
طيب أحسن اجعله الأسبوع القادم إن شاء الله.
طيب.
Okay, so it's going to answer that question next week, inshallah. We clearly have some technical difficulties here.
أي الفاتحة أن الله يبقينا بالدين والتوحيد ويهدينا لسواء السبيل مع صالح شان ظاهر باطن يهدينا الله كثير ما يحب الله يرضاه. اللهم إنا نوفق على الخير وعافنا عليك، وخذنا اللهم لكل خير وعافنا عليك، وزدنا من الغيب والغيب من عندك، اللهم حققنا من حياة التقوى والاستقامة، وعدنا من جبات الندامة. ربنا على ما تقول لكم الذي